My son proudly exclaimed, "You will never compare to my father-in-law." His words struck me like a knife. The perfect father-in-law versus a simple father who had silently supported the family for years. I stood up and replied, "Will he pay your bills? Because I'm not sending you any more money." My son's wife was shocked. "What money? We haven't received a cent from you." What I found out next shocked me. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. The fork trembled in my hand as Daniel's laughter filled the dining room. Rain drummed against the windows, but the storm outside felt gentle compared to what was brewing at my own table. "Edward always knows exactly what to do," Cora said, cutting her chicken with precise movements. "When that shipping delay happened last month, he had it solved in 2 phone calls." I watched my son nod eagerly, his eyes bright with admiration for his father-in-law. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked steadily, marking time I'd never get back. "That's the difference between real business vision and—" Daniel gestured vaguely around my dining room, taking in the wooden furniture I'd built with my own hands, the family photos watching from their frames. His meaning hung in the air like smoke. "And what?" The words came out sharper than I intended. Cora glanced between us, sensing the shift. "Arnold, the dinner is wonderful. Thank you for cooking." But Daniel was already warming to his theme. "Edward sees the big picture. He doesn't get stuck thinking small." He speared a piece of potato. "Like this logistics expansion he's planning. That's how you really help people." My jaw tightened. The green beans I'd carefully steamed suddenly tasted like ash. I'd spent 3 hours preparing this meal, hoping for one evening of family peace. "Your father works hard too," Cora said softly. But her tone carried the same unconscious dismissal I'd been hearing for months. "Sure, but construction—" Daniel shrugged. "Edward's building an empire. Real legacy stuff." The napkin crumpled in my grip. 37 years of building homes, creating something permanent, something that mattered. Apparently, that was nothing compared to moving boxes around warehouses. "Edward offered me the regional manager position," Daniel continued, his chest puffing with borrowed pride. "Says I have natural leadership potential." Natural leadership? I almost laughed. If only Edward knew where Daniel's potential had led him. "That's wonderful, honey," Cora beamed at her husband. "Your father always knows how to spot talent. Always knows, always sees, always solves." Edward Wilson, the perfect father-in-law who could do no wrong. I set down my fork carefully, afraid I might snap it in half. "He's even talking about grooming me for a partnership eventually," Daniel went on. "Says he needs someone he can trust completely." Trust completely? The irony burned in my throat. "It must be nice having someone who believes in you that much," I said quietly. Daniel missed the edge in my voice entirely. "That's just Edward. He's a natural mentor. Some people have it, some don't." The clock ticked louder. Rain pattered against glass. Somewhere in the house, the heating system hummed to life, trying to warm what had gone cold. "He's teaching me about strategic thinking," Daniel continued. "Long-term planning. Real business philosophy." "Real business," I repeated. "You know what I mean, Dad. Edward operates on a different level. He thinks bigger." Cora nodded enthusiastically. "Remember when he restructured that whole Northwest Division? Brilliant! Brilliant Edward. Perfect Edward. Edward who could solve anything, see everything, build empires, while I apparently played with blocks. Some people just have that executive mindset," Daniel said, leaning back in his chair like he was already practicing for the boardroom. "The ability to make tough decisions. To really lead." "Unlike others," I said. "Well," Daniel shrugged, his meaning clear. The silence stretched tight as a wire. Even Cora seemed to sense she'd wandered into dangerous territory. But Daniel, flushed with his father-in-law's praise and his own imagined importance, couldn't leave it alone. "Face it, Dad," he said, his voice growing louder, more confident. "You'll never measure up to my father-in-law." The words hit like a physical blow. I stood slowly, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor I'd installed myself. Every muscle in my body went rigid. Daniel sat there, triumphant and oblivious, while Cora's face went pale with shock. The rain kept falling. The clock kept ticking. And something inside me went very, very cold. I stood there, gripping the back of my chair as Daniel's words echoed in my mind. "You'll never measure up." the phrase triggered something deeper, pulling me into memories I'd tried to keep buried. 2 years ago, Daniel sitting across from my desk in the home office, his hands clasped tightly, eyes avoiding mine. "Dad, we just need to get through this month." His voice had been smaller then, embarrassed. There was this unexpected expense with the apartment, and my paycheck got delayed. I'd written the check for $2,000 without hesitation. My son needed help. That's what fathers did. "This is temporary," he'd promised, folding the check carefully, "just until I get back on my feet." 3 months later, he was back. This time it was car repairs and utilities. $3,000. His stories were getting more elaborate, his explanations more desperate. "Cora doesn't know how tight things are," he'd whispered that time. "I don't want to worry her. You understand, right? Man to man." I understood. I understood that my son was struggling and too proud to let his wife see it. So I opened my checkbook again. By the fourth visit, it had become routine. Daniel would call first, testing the waters. "Hey, Dad, could we talk sometime this week?" Then he'd show up with another crisis, another emergency that only money could solve. I started keeping better records, not because I didn't trust him, but because the amounts were getting larger. $2,500 one month, $3,200 the next. I wanted to track it all, maybe help him see the pattern, figure out where the money was actually going. The online banking made it easier. No more checks, no more paper trail he might accidentally leave where Cora could find it. Just quiet transfers from my business account to his personal account, every month, like clockwork. "Edward's helping with career stuff," Daniel had explained during one of our last conversations. "But we need cash flow help until the new position kicks in." Edward was helping with career stuff. I was helping with everything else. $75,000 over 3 years. I knew the exact number because I'd calculated it just last week, sitting in that same office, staring at the bank statements spread across my desk. $75,000 of my sweat, my labor, my careful savings. Money I'd earned hauling lumber and mixing concrete and working 14-hour days to build something lasting. All of it disappeared into whatever black hole Daniel called his temporary setbacks. The last transfer had been just 3 weeks ago, $2,800 because his rent had gone up and there was some issue with his health insurance. Another emergency. Another promise that this was the last time. "I really appreciate this, Dad," he'd said over the phone. "I know you don't have to do this. Family helps family, right?" Family helps family. I blinked, returning to the present moment. Daniel was still sitting there, still glowing with his father-in-law's approval, still completely unaware that his perfect world was about to come crashing down. Cora was staring at me with concern. "Arnold, are you all right?" The rain outside seemed louder now, more insistent. The warm light from the dining room chandelier felt harsh against my eyes. Everything looked different, sharper, like I was seeing it all for the first time. 25 payments, $75,000. 3 years of being the silent bank, while Edward got all the credit for being the generous mentor. My grip tightened on the chair back. All those months of careful planning, of budgeting my own expenses so I could help my son. All those times I'd chosen not to buy something I wanted, because Daniel needed help more than I needed comfort. And this was my thanks. This dismissal, this casual cruelty. I looked at Daniel's face, still flushed with borrowed pride, and felt something fundamental shift inside me. The hurt was still there, but underneath it was something harder, colder. You'll never measure up. We'd see about that. I straightened slowly, letting the weight of 3 years settle into my bones. The rain hammered against the windows now, demanding attention. Daniel sat there, satisfied with his little speech, while Cora watched me with growing concern. "You think Edward will take care of you?" My voice came out steady, controlled, deadly quiet. Daniel blinked, some of his smugness faltering. "What's that supposed to mean?" Simple question. I walked around the table, my footsteps deliberate on the hardwood. When Edward stops being useful to you, when the job doesn't work out the way you planned, who's going to pay your bills? "Dad, what are you talking about?" "Because I won't be sending you money anymore." The words landed like a sledgehammer. Daniel's face went white, then red, then white again. Cora's fork clattered against her plate. "What money?" Cora's voice cracked with confusion. "We haven't received a penny from you." The silence that followed was beautiful. Daniel's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. The grandfather clock ticked louder, marking each second of his panic. Daniel! Cora turned to her husband, her brow furrowed. What's he talking about? Daniel's hands were shaking now. It's not what you think. What's not what I think? Cora's voice rose sharply. Arnold just said he's been sending us money. What money, Daniel? I crossed my arms and waited. This was delicious. 3 years of careful lies were about to unravel in the span of minutes. There might have been some small, temporary, Daniel stammered. How much? Cora demanded. Daniel looked at me desperately, silently begging me to let it go, to preserve whatever dignity he had left. The same look he'd given me as a child when he'd broken something and hoped I wouldn't tell his mother. $75,000, I said calmly. Cora's gasp echoed through the room. 75. What? Over 3 years, monthly payments, sometimes more when he had special emergencies. I kept my voice conversational, like I was discussing the weather, car repairs, rent increases, utility bills, medical expenses, always something. Daniel. Cora's voice had gone deadly quiet. Is this true? Daniel's face crumpled. Cora, I can't explain. $75,000? She stood up slowly, her chair scraping against the floor. While I've been worried sick about our finances. While I've been taking extra shifts and cutting back on everything. It wasn't supposed to be that much, Daniel whispered. Where did it go? The question came from both of us simultaneously. Cora and I stared at Daniel, waiting for an answer we both suddenly desperately needed. Daniel's mouth worked soundlessly. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool evening air. He looked around the room as if searching for an escape route, but there was nowhere to run. Daniel! Cora's voice was ice. Where did the money go? Outside, lightning flashed, illuminating the dining room in stark white light for just a moment. In that flash, I saw everything clearly. My son's terror, my daughter-in-law's betrayal, and my own cold satisfaction. The thunder that followed seemed to shake the house. Daniel opened his mouth to speak, and I leaned forward, eager to hear what lie he'd try next. But more than that, I was eager to watch it all fall apart, because this was just the beginning. I can explain? Daniel's voice cracked like a teenager's. Cora leaned forward, her knuckles white against the table edge. Then explain. Where did $75,000 go? The silence stretched until even the grandfather clock seemed to hesitate. Daniel's mouth opened and closed several times before any sound emerged. It's complicated. No? Cora's voice cut through the air. It's simple. You took money from your father. Where did it go? Daniel's hands trembled as he reached for his water glass. The ice clinked against the sides like small bones rattling. There were some investments that didn't work out. What investments? I kept my voice level, curious. Online, trading platforms. Cora's face went pale. Trading? Since when do you know anything about trading? Daniel's carefully constructed facade began crumbling. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool evening air seeping through the windows. I was trying to build something for us, for our future. What kind of trading? Cora pressed. Different things. Stocks. Options. His voice grew smaller with each word. Daniel. Cora stood slowly, towering over him even though she was the shorter of the two. Look at me and tell me the truth. Daniel finally met her eyes, and something broke inside him. It wasn't trading. The admission hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Then what was it? Poker sites, online casinos. The words tumbled out in a rush. I thought I could win it back quickly. Double it, maybe triple it. Give you everything you deserved. Cora stepped back as if he'd struck her. Gambling? You've been gambling with our future? It wasn't supposed to be gambling. I had a system. $75,000. Cora's voice rose to near hysteria. How long has this been going on? 2 years. Maybe 3. Maybe 3? Cora laughed, but there was no humor in it. You don't even know how long you've been lying to me? Daniel tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't support him. Cora, listen. I'm done listening. She grabbed her purse from the counter where she'd left it. I'm done with all of this. Where are you going? Away from you? She turned to me, her eyes red but dry. Arnold, I'm sorry. I had no idea. I nodded. I know you didn't. Daniel finally managed to stand, swaying slightly. Dad, if you could just... No. The word came out harder than I intended. Figure out your problems, Daniel, but not in my house. You're throwing me out. You threw yourself out the moment you chose gambling over family. Daniel's face cycled through emotions like a broken traffic light. Desperation, anger, shame. Back to desperation. I can stop. I will stop. Then do it somewhere else. Cora was already at the front door, her coat half on. Daniel stumbled after her, making pathetic pleading sounds. Cora, wait! We can work this out. She didn't turn around. Work what out, Daniel? The lies? The addiction? The fact that you've been stealing from your father for 3 years? I wasn't stealing. What would you call it? Daniel had no answer for that. I followed them to the front door, watching my son's life implode in real time. The cold air rushed in when Cora opened the door, carrying the scent of rain and fresh earth. I'll call you tomorrow, Daniel said desperately. We'll figure this out. Cora walked to their car without looking back. Daniel stood in my doorway for a moment, searching my face for any sign of softness. Dad? Good night, Daniel. I closed the door and listened to their car start, then drive away into the night. The house felt different already, quieter, sadder, but also cleaner somehow. The dinner dishes still sat on the table, the food long cold. I looked at the mess and decided it could wait until morning. Some things needed time to settle. 2 hours later, I sat on my back deck with a glass of whiskey and a pile of bank statements. The rain had stopped, leaving the air crisp and clear. Stars peeked through the breaking clouds like scattered diamonds. I tried to sleep, but my mind kept circling back to Daniel's confession. $75,000. 3 years of careful support, all poured down the drain of his addiction. The bank statements told the story in cold numbers. January 2022, $2,000. March 2022, $2,500. By the end of that year, the monthly transfers had become routine. My accountant had probably wondered about the pattern, but had been too polite to ask. I sipped the whiskey and felt it burn away some of the evening's bitterness. The deck chair creaked under my weight, a sound I'd grown to love over the years. I'd built this deck myself, just like I'd built most of the house. 1995. Daniel was 5 years old then, more interested in playing with wood shavings than actual construction. He'd followed me around with his plastic hammer, helping by banging on scraps of lumber. When I'm big, I'll build houses too, Daddy. That memory felt like it belonged to someone else's life. I spread the statements across the small table, using my phone's flashlight to read the details. Each transfer was labeled the same way. Family support. Such innocent words for what had become an enablement system. The stars wheeled overhead, indifferent to human failure. Somewhere in the distance, a train whistle echoed through the valley. Seattle's lights twinkled like a sprawling circuit board, all those lives intersecting and diverging in patterns too complex to understand. Daniel was probably home by now, facing Cora's anger and his own shame. Part of me wanted to call him, to find some way to fix this mess. But that impulse was exactly what had created the problem in the first place. I'd taught him that money solved everything, that Dad would always be there to clean up his mistakes. Every transfer had reinforced that lesson, making him weaker instead of stronger. The whiskey glass was empty. I considered refilling it, but decided I needed clarity more than comfort. What would happen if I kept sending money? Daniel would gamble it away, probably faster each time. His addiction would grow stronger, not weaker, and eventually he'd lose everything anyway, including his marriage. But what if I stopped? The question hung in the cold air like my breath. If I cut off the money, Daniel would have to face real consequences for the first time in years. He'd have to choose between his addiction and his life. That choice might save him, or it might destroy him. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to Daniel's contact. One call, one offer of help, and this could all be smoothed over, for a while. Instead, I put the phone away and looked up at the stars again. My father had built houses too, back in the day when construction meant something different. He'd worked with his hands until they were permanently stained with sawdust and paint. When I was Daniel's age, he'd pulled me aside one day and said something I'd never forgotten. Son, the only thing you really own is what you earn yourself. Everything else is just borrowed time. I'd built this house for Daniel, dreamed of passing it down, watching his children play in the same backyard where he'd grown up. But maybe that dream was selfish. Maybe what Daniel needed wasn't inheritance, but incentive. The cold was seeping through my jacket now, reminding me that even March in Seattle demanded respect. I gathered the bank statements and stood slowly, my knees protesting the movement. Inside, the house felt warm and welcoming. I locked the back door and turned off the deck light, and then made my way to the kitchen. My address book sat in the drawer where it had lived for 20 years. I flipped through the pages until I found what I was looking for. Mary Lawson, attorney at law. Tomorrow, I would make some calls. Tonight, I would try to sleep. But first, I would make a decision that might change everything. The next morning brought sunshine through my kitchen windows, painting everything in cheerful yellow light. I sat at the table with coffee and the newspaper, trying to pretend this was just another ordinary day. The phone rang at 10:30, right as I was reading about the City Council's latest budget proposals. Daniel's name appeared on the caller ID. I considered letting it ring, but curiosity won. "Hello, Daniel?" "Dad?" His voice sounded rough, like he'd been awake all night. "About last night. I know things got heated." Heated is one word for it. I wanted to apologize for the things I said. The comparison to Edward. A pause. That wasn't fair. I sipped my coffee and waited. Daniel had always been good at apologies. They came easy to him, smooth as silk. I also wanted to explain about the money situation. It's not what you think. What do I think? Well, he seemed to lose momentum. I mean, it sounds worse than it is. $75,000 in gambling losses. How does that sound better? It's not all gone. His voice picked up speed, desperate now. Some of it I can get back. There are these techniques, strategies. Daniel. No, listen. I've been studying the systems, the odds. If I could just get a stake together, maybe 5,000 to start. No. The word hit him like a physical blow. I could hear his breathing change on the other end of the line. Dad, please, I can make this right. The only way to make this right is to stop gambling. I've stopped. Last night was a wake-up call, but I need to get back what I lost for Cora's sake. I closed my eyes. The same circular logic that had trapped him for 3 years. Where's Cora now? At work. She's pretty upset. I imagine she is. That's why I need to fix this quickly, before she does something drastic. Something in his tone made me sit up straighter. What kind of something? She mentioned lawyers, divorce lawyers. The word hung between us like a blade. Maybe that's not the worst idea. Dad, his voice cracked. You can't mean that. I mean that she deserves better than being married to an active gambler. But I'm not active anymore. I told you. Then get professional help. What kind of professional help? Addiction counseling, Gamblers Anonymous, residential treatment if necessary. I don't need... That's the only help I'm offering, Daniel. Treatment, not money. The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if he'd hung up. Edward won't help either, he said finally. You asked Edward for money? Yesterday, before the dinner. His voice was small now, ashamed. He turned me down flat. Said I needed to figure this out myself. Smart man. So you're both against me. We're both against your gambling. It's the same thing. No, Daniel, it's not. I could hear him breathing heavily, working himself up to something. Fine, if that's how you want to play it. This isn't a game, isn't it? His voice turned ugly, bitter. Rich old man teaching his son a lesson, making him beg. Daniel, you'll regret this. Both of you will regret this. The line went dead. I sat there for a long moment, listening to the dial tone. Then I set the phone down carefully and reached for my address book. Mary Lawson answered on the second ring. Mary, it's Arnold Riley. I need to discuss some changes to my will. 3 days passed before I could bring myself to make the appointment. I spent those days researching inheritance law online, reading about conditional wills and family disputes. The deeper I dug, the more convinced I became that legal action was my only remaining option. Mary Lawson's office occupied the 15th floor of a glass tower downtown, with panoramic views of Elliott Bay stretching toward the Olympic Mountains. I'd known Mary for over 15 years, ever since she'd helped me incorporate the construction business. Her mahogany desk bore the comfortable clutter of a successful practice. Law books, client files, and a coffee service that spoke of long-standing relationships. "Arnold," she stood as her assistant showed me in, extending a firm handshake. "It's been too long, though I have to say your call sounded urgent." "It is urgent." I settled into the leather chair across from her desk. "I need to change my will." Mary's eyebrows rose slightly. "May I ask why? The last version we drafted seemed comprehensive." "My son has a gambling addiction." The words hung in the air between us. Mary's expression shifted from professional curiosity to genuine concern. "I'm sorry to hear that. How serious?" "Serious enough that he's gambled away $75,000 of my money over the past 3 years." Mary reached for a legal pad, her movements measured and deliberate. "Money you gave him directly?" "Monthly support payments. He claimed he needed help with expenses." I looked out the window at the city below. Turns out he was feeding an online casino habit. "Have you confronted him about this?" "Last week. He admitted everything, then called me 3 days later, demanding more money to fix the situation." Mary wrote notes in precise handwriting. "What kind of changes are you considering?" "I want to make his inheritance conditional on getting clean." "That's possible. Washington State allows performance-based inheritance terms, provided they're specific and measurable." Relief flooded through me. I'd hoped for this answer, but hearing it from Mary made it real. "What would you recommend?" Mary leaned back in her chair, tapping her pen against the legal pad. "Completion of a certified addiction treatment program would be the most defensible requirement. Inpatient rehabilitation, followed by a period of verified abstinence." "How long?" "For gambling addiction, I'd recommend a minimum 6-month treatment program, followed by 1 year of documented sobriety." "And if he refuses?" "Then you designate an alternative beneficiary. Many clients choose charitable organizations related to the addiction issue." I thought about Daniel's threats on the phone, his ugly tone when I'd refused to enable his gambling. "There's a Gamblers Anonymous Foundation here in Seattle." "Perfect. That creates a clear incentive structure. He gets help and inherits, or the money goes to help other addicts." Mary's assistant knocked and entered with fresh coffee. We paused while she served us, the interruption giving me time to process the implications. "What about my daughter-in-law? She's innocent in all this." "We can include a separate provision for her, a fixed amount regardless of your son's compliance." $50,000. Mary made another note. "That's very generous. She's a good woman. She doesn't deserve to suffer for his choices." "This is clearly a difficult decision," Mary said gently. "Are you certain this is what you want? Family estrangements can become permanent." I thought about Daniel's voice on the phone, the entitlement and anger when I'd offered help instead of money. "I've been enabling him for 3 years. It has to stop." "Then we'll draft something ironclad. I'll need details about the specific treatment requirements, verification procedures, and timeline considerations." "How long will this take?" 2 days for the initial draft. We can schedule the signing for this week if you'd like." I nodded, feeling the weight of decision settle into certainty. "Do it." Mary walked me to the elevator, her expression thoughtful. "Arnold, you're doing this out of love, not anger. Remember that when things get difficult." The elevator doors closed on her words, but they followed me all the way home. 2 days later, I returned to Mary's office for the formal signing. The conference room felt different from her personal office, more sterile, more final. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the legal documents spread across the mahogany table like evidence in a trial. Mary had assembled everything with her usual precision. Linda Chen, the notary public, sat quietly at one end of the table with her official stamp and record book. 2 witnesses, Mary's assistant and a building security officer, waited nearby. "Before we begin," Mary said, "I want to review the key provisions one more time." She lifted the document, her voice taking on the formal cadence of legal reading. "The inheritance is contingent upon Daniel Riley's completion of a certified gambling addiction treatment program, minimum duration 6 months, followed by 1 year of verified abstinence from all forms of gambling." Yes, the words sounded harsh in the sterile room, but I felt only relief. "If these conditions are not met within 5 years of your death," Mary continued, "the estate will transfer to the Seattle Gamblers Anonymous Foundation." "And Cora's provision?" Cora Wilson Riley will receive $50,000 regardless of Daniel's compliance or non-compliance with the rehabilitation requirements. Linda looked up from her paperwork. Mr. Riley, do you understand the contents of this document? I do. Are you signing this of your own free will without coercion or undue influence? I am. The formality felt appropriate. This wasn't a casual family decision. It was a legal restructuring of my life's work. Mary handed me the pen. Any final questions? I stared at the signature line, thinking about the house I'd built with my own hands, the business I'd grown from nothing, all of it hanging now on Daniel's willingness to get help. What if he tries to contest this? The conditions are specific and legally sound. His addiction is documented through the money transfers you provided. Any contest would require him to admit his gambling problem, which actually strengthens your position. I signed my name with steady strokes. The pen felt heavier than it should have, weighted with 3 generations of family history. Linda applied her official seal with a satisfying thump. The witnesses signed in turn, their signatures making the whole thing real and irreversible. "One copy for your records," Mary said, sliding a folder across the table. "One for our files and one for the safe deposit box." I held the folder in my hands, feeling the weight of paper that could reshape Daniel's life. How will the verification work? The treatment center will provide completion certificates. For the sobriety period, we'll require monthly documentation from an approved counselor or testing facility. And if he never gets clean? Mary's expression softened slightly. Then you'll have the satisfaction of knowing your money went to help other families avoid what you've been through. The building's security officer left first, then Linda with her notary supplies. Mary's assistant cleared the conference table efficiently, leaving just the 2 of us in the bright room. "Are you at peace with this decision?" Mary asked. I looked out at the Seattle skyline, imagining Daniel somewhere in those buildings, probably unaware that his future had just changed forever. I'm at peace with trying to save him. And if he's too far gone, then I'm at peace with that too. Mary walked me to the elevator again, her hand briefly touching my shoulder. "Good luck, Arnold, with everything." The elevator descended through 15 floors of other people's problems, other people's families, other people's attempts to control the future through legal documents. When I reached the parking garage, I sat in my truck for several minutes, holding the folder containing Daniel's new reality. Tomorrow, I would call him. Tonight, I would plan exactly what to say. The drive home through Seattle traffic gave me plenty of time to think. 3 days passed before I felt ready to make the call. I spent the time carefully planning my approach, shopping for ingredients, and preparing the house for what would likely be our final family dinner. The grocery store felt different that morning, like I was shopping for a last meal. I chose simple ingredients: a roasted chicken, fresh vegetables, good bread, nothing that would require complicated preparation or distract from the conversation ahead. At the checkout, Mrs. Patterson from the deli counter asked about Daniel. "Haven't seen your boy lately. How's he doing?" "He's learning some important lessons," I said. She smiled and nodded, unaware she was probably the last person who would ask about Daniel with genuine affection. Back home, I moved through my kitchen with mechanical precision. The meal prep gave my hands something to do while my mind rehearsed the phone call ahead. By 2 o'clock, everything was ready, except the conversation that would change everything. I dialed Daniel's number before I could reconsider. "Dad?" His voice carried surprise and wariness in equal measure. "Hello, Daniel. If this is about lecturing me again about gambling, it's not." I kept my tone neutral, almost friendly. "I've been thinking about our conversation, about your money situation." Silence stretched across the line. I could almost hear him recalibrating, searching for the trap. "What about it?" "Come to dinner tonight. We'll talk." "Talk about what exactly?" "Your future. Cora's future." I paused deliberately. "Your money problems." "Are you saying you'll help us after all?" "Perfect." The desperation in his voice confirmed everything I'd suspected about his financial state. "I'm saying we should discuss it face to face, like family." "Dad, we really need—" 7 o'clock. Bring Cora. She's still pretty upset about everything. Then maybe it's time to fix things." Another pause. I could hear him breathing, probably calculating how much he could ask for, how to play this conversation. "Okay, We'll be there. Good. See you at 7. I hung up before he could ask more questions. The afternoon passed slowly. I set the dining room table with care, using the good china and silverware reserved for special occasions. This qualified as special, though not in any way I'd ever imagined. At 6:30, I retrieved the will from my study and placed it in an envelope on the side table. Everything was ready: the meal, the setting, the legal documents that would reshape Daniel's world. Looking around the dining room, I remembered other family dinners from happier times. Daniel as a boy, excited about school projects. Teenage Daniel bringing girlfriends home to meet his father. Young adult Daniel announcing his engagement to Cora. All of it led to this moment. The grandfather clock chimed 7 times. Right on schedule, I heard a car in the driveway. Time to find out if love could still triumph over addiction. The doorbell rang at exactly 7 o'clock, just as I expected. Through the peephole, I saw Daniel and Cora standing on my porch, both looking uncertain but hopeful. Daniel held a small bouquet of flowers, while Cora clutched a bottle of wine. I opened the door with a warm smile. Right on time. Dad. Daniel stepped forward awkwardly, offering the flowers. Thanks for inviting us back. Of course. I accepted the bouquet graciously. Come in, come in. Cora followed, extending the wine bottle. I wasn't sure if we should bring anything, but that's very thoughtful. I gestured toward the dining room. Dinner's almost ready. The atmosphere felt entirely different from our last gathering. Warmer lighting from the chandelier cast everything in a golden glow, and I'd opened the windows to let in the spring evening air. The table was set with my good china, the same pieces my wife had chosen decades ago. Something smells incredible, Cora said, settling into her chair. Just roasted chicken and vegetables. Nothing fancy. I poured wine for all of us, noting how Daniel's hand trembled slightly as he reached for his glass. Remember when you tried to help me build the back deck? I asked Daniel as I served the meal. Daniel laughed, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. I was 5. That hammer was bigger than me. You were so determined to help. I smiled at the memory. Every nail you tried to hammer bent sideways. But you never got frustrated, Daniel said quietly. You just kept straightening them out and letting me try again. Cora watched our exchange with visible relief. You've always been there for us, Arnold. I want you to know we appreciate it. Family is everything, I said, cutting my chicken with deliberate care. We work through problems together. Daniel shifted in his seat. About those problems, Dad. I know things have been difficult lately. I held up a hand gently. Tonight is about family. We can discuss business later. The rest of the meal passed pleasantly. I shared stories about building the house when Daniel was young, how he'd supervised from his sandbox while I laid the foundation. Cora talked about her work, carefully avoiding any mention of financial stress. Daniel seemed more relaxed than I'd seen him in months, occasionally reaching for Cora's hand. Remember the tool shed incident? I asked as we finished the main course. Daniel groaned. The one I helped you build that collapsed the next day? Your mother took pictures of you standing proudly next to that crooked disaster. I refilled our wine glasses. She said it was the most beautiful shed she'd ever seen. I felt so proud, Daniel admitted. Even after it fell down, you helped me understand what went wrong. You never made me feel stupid. Because you weren't stupid. You were learning. The grandfather clock chimed 8 times, its deep tones filling the comfortable silence that followed. I could see Daniel relaxing more with each passing minute, his confidence building as he interpreted my warmth as forgiveness. Why don't we move to the living room? I suggested, standing to clear the dishes. I'll bring coffee. Let me help, Cora offered, but I waved her away. You're guests tonight. Go make yourselves comfortable. As they headed toward the living room, I began clearing the table, stacking plates with methodical precision. Through the doorway, I could hear their quiet conversation. Daniel's voice animated as he told Cora about some childhood memory I'd triggered. I loaded the dishwasher efficiently, my movements automatic after years of practice. The kitchen felt peaceful, filled with the lingering aromas of dinner and the sound of family in the next room. When I joined them in the living room, Daniel and Cora were sitting close together on the sofa, her hand resting on his knee. They looked hopeful, united, ready to rebuild their relationship with me. Coffee will be ready in a few minutes, I said, settling into my chair across from them. Dad, Daniel began, leaning forward slightly. I know you mentioned discussing our situation. I nodded thoughtfully. Yes, I've been giving it considerable thought. The anticipation in Daniel's eyes was unmistakable. He'd interpreted the evening's warmth as proof that I'd changed my mind about helping them financially. Actually, I said, standing again, let me get something from my study, something I think will interest you both. I returned from my study carrying a manila envelope, thick with legal documents. The weight of it felt substantial in my hands as I settled back into my chair, placing the envelope deliberately on the coffee table between us. Daniel's eyes fixed on it immediately. What's that? This, I said, my voice taking on a more serious tone, is the result of my thinking about our money discussion. Cora straightened, sensing the shift in atmosphere. The comfortable warmth of dinner was evaporating, replaced by something more formal, more final. Daniel, you mentioned wanting to discuss money. Let's do that. I opened the envelope and withdrew the will, its legal weight making the papers feel heavier than they should. I had my attorney prepare some documents that address your financial situation. Daniel reached for the papers eagerly, his face bright with anticipation. Dad, I knew you'd understand. His expression changed as he began reading. The color drained from his face slowly, like water running out of a sink. His voice cracked. This can't be serious. Cora leaned over to read alongside him, her brow furrowing as she processed the legal language. What does it say? She asked softly. Daniel's hand shook as he continued reading. He's changed his will. I can only inherit if I complete gambling addiction treatment. 6 months minimum in a certified residential program, I confirmed calmly, followed by 1 year of verified abstinence from all forms of gambling. Dad, you can't do this. Daniel's voice rose sharply. I can, and I have. I kept my tone level, controlled. The documents are already filed with the court. Cora continued reading over Daniel's shoulder, her expression shifting from shock to understanding. Monthly check-ins with approved counselors, she read aloud. Medical documentation required. 5-year deadline from date of death. And if I don't meet the conditions, Daniel's voice was barely a whisper, then the estate goes to the Seattle Gamblers Anonymous Foundation. I leaned back in my chair. Your inheritance will help other families avoid what we've been through. This is punishment. Daniel stood abruptly, the papers scattering to the floor. You're cutting me off completely. No, I said firmly. I'm giving you the chance to earn what you inherit. Cora picked up the fallen documents, studying them carefully. When she looked up, her eyes were bright with understanding. This is exactly right, Daniel, she said quietly. Daniel spun to face her. What? Your father is right. You need help. Real help. Not more money to gamble away. Cora, you can't be serious. I am completely serious. She stood, moving closer to my chair. Arnold, this is incredibly brave. Daniel stared at his wife, as if seeing her for the first time. You're siding with him? I'm siding with your recovery. She turned back to the will. It says here I'll receive $50,000, regardless of whether you meet the conditions. That's right, I confirmed. You shouldn't suffer for his choices. So even if I never get clean, Cora gets money. But I don't? Daniel's voice was rising toward hysteria. That's exactly right. This is insane. I'm your son. And that's why I'm doing this. I stood as well, facing him directly, because I want you to become the man I raised you to be, not the man addiction has made you. Daniel grabbed the will from Cora's hands, scanning it desperately as if looking for loopholes. There has to be another way. There is. Get help. I don't need... Yes, you do. Cora's voice was steel. You've been lying to me for 3 years, gambling away our future. Your father is offering you a path back. Daniel looked between us, seeing his world collapse in real time. So that's it? Follow your rules, or lose everything? Follow the rules of recovery, I corrected. This isn't about control, Daniel. It's about love. He laughed bitterly. Love? You call disinheriting your son love? I call giving you a reason to get clean love. Daniel stared at the document in his hands for a long moment, then dropped it back onto the coffee table. I need time to process this. Take all the time you need, I said. The conditions don't change. He headed toward the front door, Cora following after gathering her purse. "Thank you," she said quietly, touching my arm as she passed. I nodded, watching them leave through the window. Daniel's shoulders were hunched with defeat, but for the first time in years, I felt something approaching hope. 4 months after that night, I sat at the same dining room table, but everything had changed. Daniel sat across from me, but this Daniel was different, cleaner somehow, more present. The desperate edge that had defined him for years was gone, replaced by something I barely dared to call peace. "The program director says I'm making excellent progress," he said, cutting his chicken with steady hands. 3 months down, 3 to go." Cora smiled beside him, her relief evident in every gesture. "He calls every other day now, not for money, just to talk." "How are the group sessions?" I asked. "Hard," Daniel admitted. "Really hard. But I'm starting to understand how the addiction works, how it rewired my thinking." We'd been having dinners like this twice a month since Daniel entered the Pine Ridge Treatment Center in May. Family therapy sessions had been painful but necessary, forcing us to confront years of enabling and manipulation. "I understand now why you had to do it, Dad," Daniel continued. "I was destroying everything. My marriage, my relationship with you, my future. I never stopped believing you could change," I said. "I just needed to stop making it easy not to." "The counselors explained enabling to us," Cora added. "How giving him money was actually feeding the addiction." Daniel nodded. "Every time you helped, it reinforced my belief that gambling was okay, because there would always be a safety net. And now I'm learning to build my own safety net. Real skills, real relationships, real responsibility." I looked at my son, really looked at him. His eyes were clear, focused. The furtive, calculating expression that had become his default was gone. "The financial counselor helped me create a repayment plan," Daniel said. "It'll take years, but I want to pay back every dollar I took from you." Daniel, "No, Dad, I need to do this. Not for the inheritance, but for me, for my marriage, for our family." Cora reached for his hand. "It's been hard, but we're both learning what a real partnership looks like. No more secrets, no more lies." "I have 6 months left in the program," Daniel said, "and I want to complete it even if I inherit nothing. This isn't about money anymore." "The inheritance was never the point," I replied. "Getting my son back was." Daniel's eyes filled with tears he didn't try to hide. "I was so angry when you showed me that will. I felt betrayed, abandoned. And now I understand it was the most loving thing you could have done. If you'd just given me more money, I'd probably be dead by now." The grandfather clock chimed 8 times, just as it had that night 4 months ago. But instead of marking the end of our family, it now measured our healing. "The counselor says recovery is lifelong," Daniel said. "Even after I complete the program, I'll need ongoing support." "You'll have it," I promised. "From both of us," Cora added. We finished dinner in comfortable conversation about small things. Daniel's new job prospects, Cora's promotion, my latest construction project. Normal family talk that felt miraculous after years of crisis and lies. As they prepared to leave, Daniel hugged me tightly. "Thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for not giving up on yourself." I watched through the window as they drove away, Cora's hand resting on Daniel's shoulder as he drove. They were rebuilding their marriage just as Daniel was rebuilding himself, slowly, carefully, with professional help and genuine commitment. The will still sat in my safe, its conditions unchanged, but I no longer thought of it as a weapon or a trap. It was simply what it had always been intended to be, a parent's love expressed through boundaries instead of enabling. My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. "Thanks for dinner, Dad. See you next week for therapy." I smiled, turned off the lights, and headed upstairs. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, genuine hope for my son's future. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.